You have been watching him for 11 minutes.
I was not watching him.
Take my hand.
You do not even know me.
I know enough. Dance with me.
He stopped dancing.
Because he finally understands what he chose to lose.
The Duke's crest. You sent this?
Yes. Keep the key close. You are not safe.
The champagne was warm. Seraphine Calloway had been holding it for 23 minutes. She knew because she had been watching the clock above the east archway of the car, of the Velmorth Grand Ballroom, the way a person watches a door. They are not sure whether to run through or barricade, and she had not taken a single sip. Not because she did not want it, because her hand was shaking just enough that she was afraid of what it would say about her if she raised the glass to her lips and the tremor showed. She could not afford to show anything tonight. She had made herself that promise in the carriage on the way here. She had said it quietly, to her own reflection in the rain-blurred window, while her younger sister Elena sat across from her pretending not to notice that Seraphine's jaw was locked so tight it was a wonder she could breathe. She had said, "You will walk in there. You will hold your head at the exact angle it needs to be held. You will smile at the people who know, and you will be charming to the people who don't. And you will not, under any circumstance, let Percival Dunmore see that losing him cost you a single night of sleep." It had cost her considerably more than that. But that was the private truth, and tonight, at the most attended social event of the season, hosted in the grand ballroom of a building that practically breathed old money and political calculation, tonight was not for private truths. Percival was already on the floor. She had spotted him within 4 minutes of arriving, which was longer than she had expected to manage and shorter than she had hoped. He was waltzing with Lady Rosette Fairfax, the woman he had announced his new engagement to 12 days after he dissolved his 3-year betrothal to Seraphine without even the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation. He had sent a letter, properly formatted, sealed with his family crest, 4 paragraphs of careful, bloodless language that amounted to, "I have chosen someone else, and I need you to accept this gracefully." She had accepted it. She had folded the letter, placed it in the drawer of her writing desk, and then sat on the edge of her bed in complete silence for the better part of an hour, while the world continued to spin outside her window as though nothing particular had happened. She was still accepting it. That was what she told herself as she watched him lead Rosette through a turn, competent, practiced, the same hand on the same small of the back, and felt something behind her sternum that was not quite grief and not quite anger but lived in the narrow, uncomfortable space between them. The champagne shifted in her glass, just slightly. The woman beside her made a small, sharp sound. Seraphine looked down. A thin line of champagne, barely a splash, more of a suggestion, had caught the edge of the white glove on the woman's right hand. The woman was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a shade of deep emerald that made absolutely certain no one in the room was looking at anything else. And she was looking at Seraphine now, with an expression that was technically polite and functionally a blade. "How terribly clumsy," the woman said, in the tone of someone who knows the difference between an accident and a choice, and is not yet committed to which this was. "I'm so sorry," Seraphine said. "I didn't—" "Lady Vivian Ashford," the woman said, which was not an acceptance of the apology so much as a reminder of exactly who had been inconvenienced. Seraphine knew the name. Everyone knew the name. The Ashford family was not so much a dynasty as it was a weather pattern, present in every conversation, impossible to ignore, capable of turning cold without warning. "Miss Seraphine Calloway," Seraphine returned, keeping her voice level, keeping her chin exactly where it needed to be. Vivian's eyes moved over her, not unkindly, exactly, but with the particular efficiency of a woman cataloging a potential problem, and then something shifted in her expression. Not toward warmth, toward calculation. "Of course," Vivian said. "Lord Dunmore's former—" She let the pause do the cruelty for her. "Friend." And then, from directly behind Seraphine, a voice, low, unhurried, the kind of voice that had clearly never needed volume to command a room. "You've been staring at him for 11 minutes. She turned. He was taller than she'd expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. She had seen Caelan Ashford, Duke of Velmorth, from a distance at court functions before, but distance does a peculiar thing to a man like this. It makes him look like a portrait. Up close, he was something else entirely. dark-suited, dark-eyed, with the kind of stillness that does not come from calm, so much as from an absolute certainty that the world will arrange itself around him if he waits long enough. He was not conventionally handsome in the way that Percival was, all easy symmetry and practiced charm. He was the kind of face that took time, sharp jaw, eyes that were doing something she couldn't quite name but felt in her shoulder blades. He was looking at her the way people usually look at a situation they have already assessed and are simply waiting for the other party to catch up. "I wasn't staring," she said, which was a lie, and they both knew it. 11 minutes, he repeated, with the mild certainty of a man who has never once needed to argue a fact he knows to be true. She opened her mouth, closed it. He extended his hand. Not casually, not with a smile or a charming tilt of the head. He simply extended his hand, palm up, with the same quiet confidence with which he had apparently been observing her for the past 11 minutes, and said, "Dance with me. Not would you like to. Dance with me." She looked at his hand. Then she looked at the dance floor, where Percival was now turning rosette through another careful arc, and she felt the weight of every eye in the room that was either already watching this moment or was about to be. She looked back at Calen Ashford. "You don't know me," she said. "I know enough," he said. She thought about the carriage ride, the promise she had made to her own reflection, the way Vivienne had said former with that precise surgical pause. She took his hand. The floor opened for them in the way that floors open for men like Calen Ashford. Not dramatically, not with any visible acknowledgement, but simply because every person in the immediate vicinity had already calculated that moving aside was the correct decision. His hand settled at her waist. The correct distance, the correct placement, nothing that could be commented on, nothing that could be misread as anything other than perfectly proper, and yet the warmth of it moved through the layers of her dress with an immediacy that had absolutely nothing to do with propriety. She placed her hand on his shoulder. She met his eyes. "Why?" she asked, as the music lifted them both into motion. "Why what?" he said. He moved well, effortlessly. The kind of dancer who had clearly learned as a duty, and somewhere along the way discovered he was actually rather good at it. "Why ask me to dance? Of all the women in this room." He considered this with the same unhurried quality with which he seemed to approach everything. "Because you were the only one in this room who looked like she was deciding whether to stay or leave, and I wanted to see which one you'd choose. And if I had chosen to leave, then I would have opened the door for you," he said. "But you didn't." "No," she admitted, "I didn't." They turned together, and over his shoulder, in the brief sweep of the room that the turn afforded her, Seraphine saw it. Percival had stopped dancing. He was standing at the edge of the floor, Rosette's hand still in his, but his attention entirely elsewhere, watching Seraphine with an expression she had not seen on his face before. She had seen him happy. She had seen him charming, bored, impatient, tender in the careful way that always felt slightly rehearsed. She had not seen him look the way he looked right now, which was something alarmingly close to regret. She pulled her eyes away. "He's already regretting it," Calen said quietly. He had not turned to look. He did not need to. She almost missed the step. "You can't know that. I know everything that happens in this room," he said. There was no arrogance in it. It was simply a fact, stated as plainly as a temperature. "I always have." She did not know what to do with that, so she said nothing, and let the music carry them, and tried to understand what had just happened to her evening. The waltz lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She counted, later. At the time it felt like something outside of time entirely, a small, sealed space where the normal rules of the night did not quite apply. He was not warm in the conventional sense. He did not make small talk or compliment her dress, or ask her the standard social questions that served as placeholder conversation at events like this. He was simply present, fully, completely present, in a way that made her feel, with a discomfort she could not entirely account for, seen. When the music ended and he walked her off the floor, she was aware of something she had not expected to feel tonight. Steadied, not rescued, not saved. Steadied the way a person feels when they find solid footing after walking on ice. She did not have long to sit with it. Her father appeared. Lord Aldous Harwick moved through crowds the way he moved through most things, with the particular confidence of a man who had never quite had to face the full consequence of his choices. He was silver-haired, impeccably dressed, politically connected in the way that certain men of a certain generation simply were, by inheritance and proximity, and the casual ruthlessness of knowing which doors to knock on. He bowed to Kaelin with a deference that stopped Seraphine's heart for a full second. She had never seen her father bow to anyone like that. "Your Grace," Harwick said. There was something in his voice, not quite anxiety, but the careful neutrality of a man who is very aware of a debt. "Lord Harwick," Kaelin said. His tone was pleasant, empty of everything except the surface. They exchanged perhaps 40 words. The state of the season, the quality of the evening, something brief and bloodless about the upcoming parliamentary session. Harwick laughed twice at things that were not quite jokes. Kaelin smiled once in a way that did not move past his mouth. And then Harwick excused himself with another bow, marginally less deep this time, she noticed, and moved back into the crowd. Seraphine looked at Kaelin. "What does my father owe you?" she asked. The question surprised him. She could see it, just barely, a slight adjustment in his expression, the way a still pond shows a ripple before it settles. He looked at her for a moment that was approximately 1 beat too long to be comfortable. "Ask him," he said, "but ask him before the week is out. After that, the answer will change." "What does that mean?" "It means some truths have expiration dates," he said, "and this one is running out." He held her gaze a moment longer, just long enough for her to understand that this was not a riddle for its own sake, that he was telling her something real and something urgent. And then Lord Theron Blackwell, a lean, watchful man she recognized as Kaelin's closest advisor, appeared at his shoulder with a folded note, and Kaelin turned away with the practiced ease of a man who could hold 20 conversations simultaneously and never quite give any single person the impression they had been dismissed. She stood there for a moment, holding her still untouched glass of champagne. Then she set the glass down on the nearest tray and decided she needed air. The powder room off the east corridor was empty when she arrived, or it was, for exactly 40 seconds. Long enough for Seraphine to brace both hands on the marble basin and breathe. Really breathe, for the first time since she had entered the building. She looked at herself in the glass. She looked, she thought, entirely composed. This was either a triumph or a warning. She wasn't sure which. Her face had learned over the past 3 weeks to keep its own counsel, to show what was needed and conceal what wasn't. She was not sure if this was strength or if it was simply what happened to a person when they had practiced long enough. She was still deciding when the door opened. Vivienne Ashford entered with the air of a woman who has never in her life been surprised to find another woman in a room she wanted. She moved to the basin beside Seraphine, adjusted something invisible in her reflection, and then, with extraordinary casualness, said, "He does this at every event. You know, the dance. It is a political gesture. He chooses someone who needs the social capital, someone whose stock is a little diminished, and he lends them his name for 4 minutes. It costs him nothing, and it keeps the room from growing predictable." Seraphine watched Vivienne in the mirror. "I'm sure you're right," she said. "I usually am," Vivienne said pleasantly. "I only mention it because you looked, and I say this with genuine kindness, like a woman who might read something personal into an impersonal act, and that would be a terribly painful mistake to make, particularly given everything you've already been through this season." She smiled. It was a beautiful smile. It had the warmth of marble in winter. "Thank you for the kindness," Seraphine said. She dried her hands. She smoothed her skirt. She walked back toward the door with her chin at exactly the angle it needed to be. But as she stepped into the corridor, one thought stayed with her, persistent and sharp as a splinter. Vivienne had not sounded like a woman who was warning a stranger away from something indifferent. She had sounded like a woman who was warning a rival away from something she wanted for herself. And if Kaelin's 4-minute dance was truly the empty political gesture Vivienne claimed it was, then there was nothing to want, nothing to protect, which meant Vivienne was afraid. The question that followed Seraphine all the way to the end of the evening, all the way through the careful goodbyes and the long carriage ride home, and the walk up the front steps of her family's townhouse in the cold dark of a night that had somehow lasted a decade, was what, exactly, Vivienne Ashford was afraid of. The front step. She almost didn't see it. Her foot nearly went past it before her eye caught the shape. Small, dark against the pale stone. Something metal glinting in the thin light of the nearest lamp. She bent, picked it up. A key, old iron heavy in her palm. Ornate at the head, the kind of key made for a specific lock in a specific door in a specific building that takes its architecture seriously. Attached to it by a thin leather cord, a small card. She turned it toward the light. 4 words in handwriting she did not recognize. Precise. Deliberate. You are not safe. She turned the card over. On the back, pressed into the card stock with a seal she recognized from every document, every letter, every official correspondence she had ever seen emerge from the Ashford family, the crest of the Duke of Velmorth. She stood on the front step of her house in the cold with a key in her hand, and her heart making a sound it had not made once in the entire long disaster of the evening. Not fear, exactly. Something that sat directly next to it. She did not sleep. She spent the night in the chair beside her window, the key on the table next to her, the card face up and face down and face up again, as though it might say something different depending on the direction. Elena knocked on her door at midnight, and Seraphine called through the wood that she was fine. She was reading. She would see her at breakfast. Elena paused on the other side of the door long enough to make clear she believed none of this, and then she went away, because she had always understood that Seraphine needed to walk certain rooms alone before she could talk about what she found inside them. By the time the first gray suggestion of morning began at the edges of the curtains, Seraphine had made a decision. She was going to the Ashford residence, not because she felt safe going, not because she fully understood what she was walking toward, but because the past 3 weeks had taught her something about what it cost to stand still when everything in her told her to move, and she had decided, quietly, firmly, with the same conviction with which she had walked into that ballroom, that she was done paying that particular price. She was done waiting for other people's explanations to arrive at their own convenience. She dressed without waking the household. She put the key in her coat pocket. She stepped out into the early morning streets, and she walked. She thought, as she walked, about the way Caelan Ashford had extended his hand on that dance floor, not asking, not performing, just offering, with the absolute certainty of a man who had already decided something. She thought about the way her father had bowed, about Vivienne's smile and what it was hiding, about Percival's face when he saw her dancing, the expression she had never seen on him before, the one that looked like a man watching something walk out of a door he had chosen to close. She thought about 4 words on a card. You are not safe. The Ashford residence on Calendon Square was exactly what a house belonging to the Duke of Velmorth should be. Large, correct, completely without the ornamental excess that lesser titles sometimes use to compensate for what they lacked. The gate was iron. The stonework was old and impeccably maintained, the kind of building that did not need to announce itself. She stood at the gate for exactly 5 seconds. Then she put the key in the lock. It turned. The door at the end of the short path opened before she reached it. A staff member, young, composed, apparently undisturbed by the fact that a woman had let herself in through the front gate at 6:40 in the morning, simply said, "Miss Calloway, His Grace is in the East Study. 3rd floor, 2nd door on the right. He said to send you up directly." He said he had been expecting her. She walked up 2 flights of stairs in a house that was nothing like its exterior. Inside, it was warmer, more lived in than she had anticipated. Books on tables and a dog-eared newspaper left on a windowsill and a coat thrown over a banister in a way that no one had apparently considered necessary to correct before her arrival. A house that was powerful by inheritance, but inhabited by a person rather than a position. She knocked on the 2nd door on the right. "Come in," he said. The study was not what she expected either. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Something severe, perhaps. Something that matched the way rooms belonging to men like Caelan Ashford were described in society columns. Formal, cold, curated for impression. What she found was a room that was clearly being actively used. Documents in organized stacks across a wide desk. A fire that had been going for hours based on the quality of its burn. 3 chairs that had been occupied recently and not yet returned to their formal positions. And a map spread open on the side table with annotations in handwriting too small to read from the doorway. Caelan was at the desk, not standing to receive her. Sitting, jacket off, sleeves turned back to the elbow. The only version of informality she imagined a man like this permitted himself. Reading something he finished before he looked up, with a deliberateness that she was beginning to understand was not rudeness so much as an unwillingness to pretend at things. He looked up. Their eyes met. "You came early," he said. "You knew I'd come," she said. "I hoped you would," he said, which was a different thing, and they both knew it. She stepped inside. She did not take a seat. She closed the door behind her and stood in the center of the room with the key in her hand, and her chin at the angle she had learned to hold it, and said, "You sent me a warning. I want to know why." He set down the document he had been reading. He was quiet for a moment, and she had the sense that he was deciding not what to say, but how much of it, what to give her now, and what she needed to be brought to slowly. The way you bring someone warm water after the cold, because some truths are too hot to be administered directly. "Sit down," he said, not unkindly. "Tell me first," she said. He almost smiled, not quite. The corner of his mouth considered it. "You always negotiate from the standing position?" "When I'm not sure whether I'll want to leave quickly," she said. This time he did smile. Small and genuine and entirely unlike anything she had seen on his face the night before, when his expression had been immaculate and controlled and readable only by the people who knew what to look for. This smile reached his eyes. Just barely. Just enough. "Fair," he said. He leaned back. He looked at her directly in the way she was beginning to understand was characteristic, not calculated, just honest in the particular way that very few people who occupied his position could afford to be. "You asked me last night what your father owes me. Yes. The accurate answer is nothing, not anymore. But what he owed me, what he agreed to 6 months ago, in exchange for my signature on a land acquisition that benefited his estates and would have taken another 3 years to clear without my intervention, was a vote." She waited. "A specific vote," Calen said, "on a restructuring bill, one that required the support of several lords with historically resistant positions. Your father was one of those lords. He agreed to support the bill." He paused. "He also agreed to something else." "Tell me," she said. "He agreed to dissolve your engagement," Calen said. The room went very quiet. Not silent. The fire was still going. There were sounds from somewhere below in the house. The street beyond the window had begun its mourning. But quiet in the way that a room goes quiet when something has just been said that rewrites the shape of the space it was said in. Seraphine looked at him. My father dissolved my engagement, that was..." She stopped. She started again. "Percival chose to leave. He chose Rosette Fairfax. Percival chose a great deal of money and a very convenient release from a contract that his family had been looking for grounds to exit for 2 years, Calen said. And his voice was carefully, deliberately gentle in a way that cost him something. She could see it, the effort of delivering this without the bluntness that was clearly his more natural mode. "Your father offered him the release in exchange for his vote. Percival took it. Rosette Fairfax was a conversation that happened afterward, not before." She stood very still. She thought about the letter, the 4 careful paragraphs, the bloodless, proper language, the way it had offered no real reason and no real emotion, just a formal dissolution and a request for graceful acceptance. Because Percival Dunmore had never been a man who struggled to find the correct form for a feeling he did not actually have. "He traded me," she said. Not a question. "Yes," Calen said. "My father, for a vote on a land bill." "Yes." She breathed. She breathed again. She thought she might say something large and appropriate to the size of this, something that would adequately express what it felt like to discover that the worst 3 weeks of her adult life had been the direct product of a political transaction she had never been consulted about, and what came out instead was very small. "How long have you known?" 3 months, he said. 3 months, she repeated. "And you said nothing." "I had no right to," he said. She heard the weight in it. Not an excuse. A fact he had clearly turned over many times. "The information came to me through channels that are... I monitor correspondence that touches on legislative negotiations. I knew, but Seraphine..." He said her name for the first time. No title, no Miss Calloway, just her name, and it landed in the room with a weight that was entirely disproportionate to its syllables. "You were engaged. You were building a life. What would it have been for me to arrive at your door 3 months ago and tell you, the man you've agreed to marry has just agreed to leave you for the right price?" She looked at him. "I would have wanted to know," she said. "I know," he said. "I know you would have, and I have asked myself, since the morning I found out, whether I made the right decision. I don't think I did." The honesty of it stopped her. She had expected him to defend himself, to explain the political complexity, the limits of his jurisdiction, the reasons why intervention would have been inappropriate. She had not expected him to simply say, "I don't think I did." She sat down, not because he had asked her to, because her legs needed a moment. "You watched me at the ball," she said. "For 11 minutes, you said. Longer than that," he said. "I arrived before you did. Why? Because I knew you would come. Because you are not the kind of person who disappears when things become painful, and because I wanted—" He stopped himself, started again with more precision. "I wanted to see how you were carrying it." "And?" she said. "And you were carrying it exactly the way I expected you to," he said. "With everything you had, with none of the credit you deserved for it." She did not speak for a moment. Then she said, "The key, the warning, why now? What has changed?" The door opened. Theron Blackwell entered with the particular efficiency of a man who has spent years delivering urgent information to a person who expects it delivered without drama. He was carrying a leather folder. He looked at Seraphine without surprise, which told her that Caitlin had told him she was coming, or that Theron Blackwell simply possessed a quality of mind that made surprise an uncommon visitor. "It has moved to correspondence," Theron said, by way of greeting no one in particular. He set the folder on the desk. "Someone has accessed Lord Harwick's private letters, specifically the exchange from the 8th and 9th of last March, both parties, and they are not being subtle about where they intend to take this." Caitlin opened the folder without haste, he read. Seraphine watched his face. She was getting better, she realized, at reading it. The stillness was not blankness. It was control, the same way a river in full current is not still but looks it from above. The angle of his brow, the slight tightening at the corner of his mouth, the way his gaze moved through the document with the thoroughness of someone who had been trained to find the thing that matters most in the shortest possible time. "The letters contain her name," Theron said, and now he looked at Seraphine directly. "Yours. You appear in the dissolution agreement as, and I am sorry to put it this way, as the subject of the exchange, not a party to it, the subject." "Collateral," Seraphine said. "In the legal language," Theron confirmed. "Yes. And if this becomes public," she said. Not a question. She was already ahead of it. 3 weeks of sitting alone in her room with too much silence and too much intelligence had made her very good at following a disaster to its conclusion before she arrived there. "My name is on a document that proves my own father bartered my engagement, which means the scandal attaches to me regardless of the fact that I had no knowledge of and no part in any of it." "It is not fair," Theron said. "No," she agreed. "It never is." She looked at Caitlin. "Who has the letters?" Caitlin closed the folder. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, with a quietness that was somehow more alarming than volume would have been, "Someone who is interested in using them to argue that this house, this name, has been politically compromised by its associations." She felt the implication land before she fully understood it. "Me," she said. "My association with you. The dance. One dance," he said. "But yes, in the hands of someone motivated to frame it as a pattern of recklessness, a duke seen publicly lending favor to a woman whose family is attached to a legislative scandal, it could be shaped into something damaging." She thought about emerald silk, about a smile that did not reach its eyes. "Vivienne," she said. Neither man answered immediately. But Cailin's expression did something, a tightening, a confirmation of something already known, and that was answer enough. "She wants the dukedom," Seraphine said. "A branch of the family she controls wants the dukedom," Caitlin said. "She wants— I think she is honest enough with herself to admit it, to matter, to have shaped something that lasts. And you are standing between her and that." "I have stood between her and that for 6 years," he said. "She has been patient. She is good at being patient." He paused. "But she moved too quickly this time. She accessed correspondence without covering the access. She made assumptions about how much I knew and how quickly I would act." He closed the folder. "She assumed I would be slower than I am." "Are you going to stop her?" Seraphine asked. "I already have," he said. She looked at him. "The morning letters," he said. "While you were walking here, Theron had already reached the 3 people with access to Harwick's filing records and established a chain of accountability. The letters are back where they belong. The copies that were made have been addressed." "Addressed," she said. "Permanently," he said. She thought about what that meant for a person like Vivienne Ashford. Not public exposure. That was not how these things worked at this level. Public exposure was for people who had no other levers. For people at this level, consequences were quiet and complete and left no visible mark. Vivienne would simply find, in the weeks that followed, that her invitations arrived a little later than they used to, that the conversations she joined became slightly shorter, that the introductions she requested passed through more hands before they landed, and that none of this would ever be attributed to anything specific. It was how power actually worked, Seraphine thought. Not with fire, with weather. She sat with everything she had been told for a long moment. Then she looked at Kaelin and said the question she had been carrying since the night before, since the powder room, since the warning card, since the moment on the dance floor when she had felt something she could not quite name. "Why did you really ask me to dance?" He was quiet. He was quiet long enough that Theron made a quiet, barely audible sound that might have been clearing his throat. Or might have been the sound a person makes when they recognize that they have just become the third person in a conversation that has become a two-person conversation. And he said something brief about needing to verify a detail on the correspondence timeline. And he left. The door closed. The fire settled. Kaelin looked at her. "Because," he said, and then he stopped, which was the first time she had seen him be anything other than precise with language, and the imprecision of it told her more than the precision ever had. He tried again. "I have watched you carry things that were never yours to carry. The expectations of a father who sees you as a resource. The image of a man who chose his ambition over his integrity and let you believe it was your failing. 3 years of building a life around a future that was never going to be what you thought it was. And I watched you walk into that room last night." He stopped again. Steadied. "You walked in knowing all of it was waiting for you. Percival was going to be there. People who knew were going to be there. And you walked in anyway, because you were not going to let him define where you were allowed to stand." She said nothing. "I asked you to dance," he said, "because I have wanted to give you somewhere to put all of it down for longer than I was prepared to admit to myself. And the ball was the first time I had a reason that was socially acceptable." "That was your reason?" she said. "Social acceptability?" "The social acceptability was the excuse," he said. "The reason was that I was tired of watching you from a distance and pretending I was doing it for any reason other than the fact that you were the first person in a very long time who has made me forget to calculate." She breathed. "You are afraid of me," she said slowly, not as an accusation, just as something she was working out in real time. "Terrified," he said, which was not the word she had expected from the most feared duke in the kingdom, and the complete absence of irony in how he said it made her heart do something complicated and involuntary. "I should probably tell you something," she said. "Tell me," he said. "I don't trust easily, not anymore, possibly not again for some time." "I know," he said, "and I am angry about what my father did, about what Percival did, about the fact that I built 3 years of a life around something that was already being sold out from under me, and I didn't know, and I should have known, and I am very angry, Kaelin." His name in her mouth, first time. She felt him feel it. "You should be," he said. "You can't fix that," she said. "No," he agreed. "And I am not in any way ready to—" "I know," he said. "I am not asking you to be anything you are not ready to be. I am not asking you to decide anything today. I am telling you the truth, because I decided this morning that you had been given enough half-truths to last a lifetime, and I was not going to add to the collection." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why does everyone call you the feared prince?" she asked. Something crossed his face, a shadow of something old and settled, the kind of thing a person has lived with long enough to have made a kind of peace with. "Because I have made decisions that frightened people. I have made decisions that were correct and cost people things they valued, and they found it easier to call me feared than to acknowledge that the fear was their conscience. Is that the whole of it?" "No," he said. "Sometimes I am genuinely frightening." "I'm not frightened of you," she said. "I know," he said. "That was the first thing I noticed." She did not make any decisions that morning. She went home. She ate breakfast with Elena, who asked no questions, and simply refilled her tea twice, and pressed a hand briefly to her shoulder when she passed, which was all the support Seraphine needed, and more than she could have asked for. She went to her father's study that afternoon. She did not tell him what she knew. She simply looked at him. This man who had loved her, she was certain, in the particular limited way that some people love the people they cannot quite see as full and separate. And she said, "Did you make a decision that affected my engagement without consulting me?" He was quiet for a very long time. "Seraphine," he began. "Yes or no," she said. A longer silence. It was more complicated than yes or no. He looked away. He looked at his desk. He looked at his hands, which had signed things she never knew about, in rooms she was never invited into, and he said, very quietly, "Yes." She nodded. She left. She spent the following week feeling the shape of the new landscape of her life, the way you walk slowly through a room rearranged in the dark, not because you cannot manage it, but because you want to know where everything actually is now. before you move at normal speed. She saw Kaelin twice. Once at a parliamentary session she attended as a guest at Elena's insistence, where he caught her eye across a room full of men performing importance and gave her something that was not quite a nod, and not quite a smile, but existed in the territory between them. And she found, to her own interest, that it settled something in her chest. Once at a garden luncheon where he arrived late and sat at the opposite end of a long table and said nothing to her directly the entire afternoon, but when she rose to leave, he was somehow already at the door, and he said, quietly, "How are you managing?" And she said, "Better than I expected." And he said, "I am glad," and she went home with that particular economy of words sitting warmly in her chest for the rest of the day. She was not ready to call it what it was, but she was, she admitted to herself, looking forward to the next time. The court event 3 weeks later was smaller than the ball, more intimate, in the particular way that events for people who know each other's full names on sight are intimate, no less political, but narrower in its ambitions. A dinner reception at the West End Gallery, something to do with a charitable endowment, the kind of event that existed at the intersection of genuine generosity and the need to be seen being generous. Seraphine attended with Elena. She was, for the first time in over a month, genuinely at ease. Not performing ease. Actually feeling it, the way you feel it when you have finally finished grieving something enough to begin breathing again. She was talking with the wife of a parliament member she had always liked. A warm, funny woman named Lady Greer, who had made no mention of anything that happened this season, and was currently describing a horse she had recently purchased with what could only be called devotional admiration, when she saw Percival. He was on the far side of the room, without Rosette, alone with a glass of something he was not drinking, and he was looking at Seraphine with the expression she had seen on the dance floor, the one that looked like a man watching something walk out of a door he had chosen to close. He began moving toward her. She saw it happen, the shift in his posture, the decision made, the direction set. She had 11 seconds before he reached her, and she spent them understanding exactly what she would hear if she let him speak. The speech, the one she could see in the set of his shoulders, something carefully constructed about regret and circumstances, and the fact that he had not been given the full picture, and perhaps there was room for conversation. She felt someone at her side, not touching her, simply present in that particular way she had begun, without quite intending to recognize. She looked up. Kaelin. He was not looking at Percival. He was looking at her. His expression was quiet, attentive, giving her nothing except this. "Whatever you decide, I am with you. Say the word," he said quietly, "and I'll follow your lead." She looked at Percival, who had stopped 10 feet away, who was waiting. She looked at Kaelin. She took his arm, not dramatically, not as performance, or perhaps as a performance, but the kind that is also, simultaneously and completely, the truest possible version of a choice. She turned away from Percival Dunmore, and she walked with Kaelin toward the part of the room where the light was better and the conversation was easier, and the air did not taste like regret. She did not look back. She did not need to. 6 weeks later. The garden behind the Ashford estate was the kind of garden that happened over generations, not designed so much as accumulated, each decade adding something that grew into the next, until the whole became something too organic to be called planned, and too beautiful to be called accidental. It was late afternoon. The light was the particular gold that only late autumn permits before it withdraws entirely. They had been walking for half an hour, not about anything consequential. Elena's new ridiculous hat, a book he had been reading that she had opinions about, strong ones, and he had listened to all of them with the concentrated attention of someone who finds opinions, even when they differ from his own, fundamentally interesting. The horse that Lady Greer had apparently named Wellington and was deeply serious about. He had laughed at Wellington, a real laugh. She had discovered over the past 6 weeks that Kaelin Ashford's laugh was a rare and entirely disproportionate gift, the kind of thing that made you want to say things that earned it. They stopped near the old stone bench at the garden's east edge. The afternoon light moved through the leaves above them. He looked at her. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Tell me," she said. "I love you." He said it the way he said most things, with no decoration and no performance, just the full weight of it, delivered directly. The way he had told her truths she hadn't asked for and listened to opinions he hadn't prompted, and waited 6 weeks without asking for anything, except the chance to be present, while she found her footing. She looked at him. "Not the title," he said. "Not the alliance. not the woman who handled a public humiliation with more grace than it deserved. You, Seraphine Calloway, who walks into rooms she is afraid of because she has decided they do not get to have the last word, who asks yes or no questions when the world tries to give her paragraphs, who has not once, in all of this, let anyone else define where she is allowed to stand. She breathed. You watched me for 3 months, she said. Before the night of the ball, he confirmed. And 11 minutes at the ball itself. 11 is a conservative estimate. And then you sent me a key and a very alarming card. The card was intended to be urgent, not alarming. You included your family crest. I wanted you to know it was me. It was alarming, she said. And it was also the first time in 3 weeks that I felt like someone was paying attention. She paused. Not to my composure, not to how I was managing appearances, to whether I was actually safe. He was very still. I have spent my entire adult life, she said slowly, making myself easy to overlook. Not because I am not capable of being seen, but because the people who were supposed to see me kept finding it more convenient to use me instead. My father, Percival, everyone who knew what was happening and found it easier to stay quiet. She looked at him. You are the first person who used what you knew to protect me rather than to leverage me. I will always use what I know to protect you, he said. I know, she said. She stepped closer. She said, I am not fully healed. I want you to know that. I am better than I was, and I am not finished, and there are still mornings when I wake up and feel the whole weight of it, before I have had my tea, and I cannot promise you I will not carry that into whatever this is. I don't want you healed, he said, which surprised her. I want you whole. That is different. Healing means erasing. Whole means you get to keep everything that made you who you are, including the parts that were broken, and put themselves back together. He held her gaze. I am not particularly easy myself. I am intense and I am protective, and I will probably frustrate you with the degree to which I want to know you are safe at all times. And I am terrified, Seraphine. In case I did not make that clear enough the first time. She laughed, genuine, unguarded, the kind of laugh she had not given anyone in longer than she could easily measure. He looked at her when she laughed the way she had noticed he looked at rare things, with the careful, honest attention of someone who wants to memorize something before it passes. I am going to say yes, she told him, to all of it. The protection and the frustrating intensity and whatever terrifying quality it is that makes every lord and advisor in the kingdom call you feared. I am not actually that frightening. You are a little frightening, she said. Perhaps slightly, he allowed. But you have never been frightening to me, she said, and I think that is probably the point. He reached out. He took her hand. Not the formal ballroom correctness of a waltz, just her hand in his, in the late gold afternoon, in a garden that had been growing for generations and would keep growing for generations more. Stay, he said, not commanding, asking. The most honest ask she had ever heard from a man who did not often need to ask for anything. I'm already here, she said. The light moved through the leaves above them. The garden was quiet. Somewhere below in the house, she could hear Theron Blackwell's voice saying something efficient and necessary, as he always was, as he likely always would be. And she thought, this is what it looks like, not the ballroom version, not the political performance. This, a garden, late afternoon, his hand, her laugh, all the complicated truth of two people choosing each other with their eyes open. This was what it had always been supposed to look like. She had simply needed the right person to make it legible. If this story reached you, if you felt every heartbeat of that ballroom, every silent moment of Seraphine standing at a front step, holding a key that changed everything, every breath of the afternoon in that garden when she finally chose something that was purely, completely hers, then you are exactly who this channel exists for. You understand what it means to watch someone carry more than they should have to carry. You understand the particular relief of seeing someone finally chosen, not as a convenience or a strategy or a social calculation, but as the person themselves. That is what these stories are built around. That is what we come back to here, again and again. Not just the romance, but the moment someone decides they are worth choosing. If that moved you, stay. Subscribe to this channel and let every new story find you. Leave a comment and tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it the dance? The key on the front step? The moment Seraphine took Kaylin's arm and walked away from Percival without a single backward glance? Tell me. I genuinely want to know. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about courage dressed up as romance, share this with them. Some stories find us exactly when we need them. Be the person who passes one along. New stories come regularly, and every one of them is built around the same promise. Real emotion, real stakes, and someone who gets chosen exactly the way they deserve to be. Stay with us.